Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here. I'm back again today doing another video, and the subject of today's video is going to be on the Utah Jazz. Specifically, I'm going to be looking at trades to suit Donovan Mitchell leaving the Utah Jazz because there's been a lot of talk in the media and on the Jazz that Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell really do not get along, and that they need to trade one or the other of the two players in order to move on as a franchise. So with that in mind, I drew up some trades that the Jazz could potentially do in order to get Donovan Mitchell off of the team and try and get some sort of a good return for him. So I think with that in mind, we'll just kind of dive right into them here. And just keep in mind that, I'm just trying my best with the trade scenarios. They may not be perfect or whatever, and I think the hard part with Donovan Mitchell is that he's on a rookie contract, but he's playing like an all-star, so it's not necessarily easy to find realistic, reasonable trades for him, but I put in my best effort here. So the first trade I have is Donovan Mitchell going to the Raptors in exchange for a first-round pick in 2020, a first-round pick in 2022, along with Terrence Davis, Chris Boucher, and OG Anunoby. So why did the Jazz do this? Well, I think you're going to have to look at with a lot of these Jazz trades is that, if a player like Mitchell says that they want to get traded, their value basically instantly goes down in the NBA, so teams are just going to look for what's the best value that they can get, and in this scenario, I think that this is a pretty good deal for them in that they add a lot of depth. They get a quality shooting guard in Terrence Davis, who they could start right away, and he could honestly average 15 points a game for you. OG Anunoby is a really good wing defender and 3-and-D kind of guy. He needs to improve his efficiencies a little bit on offense, but he's pretty solid for 10 to 12 points a night on 45% from the field. So you could have him come off the bench or start, and then Chris Boucher is just a really good backup power forward at this point. And then the 2 first-round picks to sweeten the deal and to provide the Jazz some depth for the future. So their rotation after this looks something like Conley, Terrence Davis, probably then you got Bojan Bogdanovic, Joe Ingles, and Rudy Gobert with a bench of Jordan Clarkson, OG Anunoby, and Chris Boucher, so that's pretty good. And then as far as the Raptors, you get a guy who's a really good complement to this team. They're kind of missing that third scoring punch after DeRozan's gone, and now you've got Kawhi gone, so they're really looking for that last scoring punch that they had those past couple of years. So I think that Donovan Mitchell would really fill that role very well. And honestly, yeah, you give up a lot of young guys and some draft capital, but when you look at the core of this team being Lowry, Siakam, Norman Powell, and Serge Ibaka, you don't give up any of those guys. You don't arguably give up any of your top 4 guys. So I think that in that sense, it's a pretty good trade for them in that your lineup after this is looking something like Lowry, Mitchell, then probably at small forward you have Norman Powell, or you start Rondae Hollis-Jefferson and have the other guy come off the bench. Then Serge Ibaka, then actually they've been playing him a lot more at center, so the power forward would be I'm trying to think. Yeah, I guess you'd have Serge at the power forward, Gasol at center, and then off the bench you'd have Van Fleet, and you'd have either between Powell or Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, whoever didn't start. So that's a pretty good bench, I still think. And overall, as a team, you lose depth, but you definitely get the overall best player out of the trade by far in Mitchell. Next trade I have here is between the Nuggets and the Jazz. I have Donovan Mitchell going to the Nuggets in exchange for 2 first-round picks, along with Monty Morris and Michael Porter Jr. Now, you might think that this is not a very good return, but in my opinion, you gain 2 first-round picks, that's some really good draft capital, and then you're getting Monty Morris, who's one of the best backup point guards in the league and who actually might be your starter if you went to the Jazz. He could even maybe play some combo guard too, depending on how willing you are to accept a smaller dude playing the 2 and maybe less than stellar defense from him. And then Michael Porter Jr., who's like the definition of untapped potential, and he hasn't really gotten his chance to star in this league yet, but I like the idea of a lineup of something like Conley, Bojan, Bogdanovich at the 2, Porter Jr. at the 3, at the 4, Joe Ingles at the 5, Gobert, and then a bench of like Monty Morris and Jordan Clarkson. I like that a lot. And then the 2 first-round picks for the future. And then as for the Nuggets, what they really need is just like that second like bona fide scorer to go with Jokic. And so if they bring in Mitchell, you know, they lose a lot of nice young pieces and a lot of draft picks, but then you've kind of locked into this nice core of Jamal Murray, Donovan Mitchell, Gary Harris, Will Barton, and Jokic. And I think that's a really solid group of 5 guys to be going forward with, and it would set them up to improve going forward. Next here I have a trade with the Jazz and the Hawks. I have the Hawks getting Ed Davis and Mitchell, and then I have the Jazz getting DeAndre Hunter, Kevin Huerter, and their first round pick this year, which, considering they're like a bottom 5 team in the league, will be a pretty good pick. So for the Hawks, I think it makes sense. You know, obviously Mitchell is an upgrade over Hunter and Huerter, and I think he's worth the really high pick that they're giving up in the draft as well, because I think he's about as good as any player you'd get in this draft. But the thing for the Jazz is, the thing for the Hawks is you just need like a second consistent guy who can create a shot on this team if Trae Young doesn't have it, or if he's getting clamped down on or double teamed. And so you definitely get that in bringing in Mitchell. So your starting lineup for them would probably look something like Trae Young, Donovan Mitchell, Cam Reddish, John Collins, and Clint Capella. And as for the Jazz, their reasoning for this, you know, keep in mind again, these are scenarios I made up that, like, if the Jazz get into a bad enough bind where they feel like they need to trade away one of their guys, and they just think the situation is untenable, then this could be a trade that they would go for. You know, DeAndre Hunter's a promising young guy who's basically going to be like a really good defender, I think, and an okay scorer. I think this isn't meant as an insult at all, but he's going to be like a better version of Trevor Ariza. And you think about Trevor Ariza, like in his prime, he was like 12 points a game on good efficiency and like good wing defense, and I think that's what DeAndre Hunter will be, but maybe instead of 12 points a game, like 15, but relatively, like, think of Trevor Ariza's prime. I think that's like the floor for DeAndre Hunter. Besides that, Kevin Huerter is basically like Kyle Korver light, and then the first round pick is supposed to be really high in this next draft, so they would get a really nice young prospect, depending on where that pick would line up. Next, I have a trade of Mitchell and Ed Davis to the Timberwolves in exchange for, again, 2 first-round picks, including the Wolves' first-round pick this year, which would be likely in the top 5, and then also Jarrett Culver and Malik Beasley. So from the Timberwolves' perspective, I think that they really need like that third dude, and they really need a big 3, I think, to be an impactful team. Will the defense on this team be very bad after this trade? Yes, because Donovan Mitchell is not really a defender. But you can tote out a lineup of D'Lo, Donovan Mitchell, Josh Okogie, and then James Johnson and Cat. And that will be a very good lineup, I think. Really the only sieves being James Johnson, but I think he's fine. He's like an average starter. But besides that, you've got 3 like great offensive players in Mitchell, D'Lo, and Cat. And as for the Jazz, again, this is considering a scenario where, like, if the team were to feel like they're backed into a corner and they have to trade him, then they would still be getting back Culver, who's a rookie who is very inconsistent but very athletic and shows promise. Malik Beasley, who since getting off of Denver has looked like an above-average starter. He kind of feels like when Tobias Harris got off of Milwaukee and he actually got some minutes and he was able to put up like 20 points a game. That feels like Malik Beasley a lot. So a guy who would definitely be starting. And then 2 first-round picks, 1 being super high this next year, which could be very valuable. Starting lineup for the Jazz would look like, let's see here. It would look probably like Conley, Beasley, Ingles, Bogdanovich, Gobert with a bench of Clarkson and Culver. And then lastly, the last trade I have on here is Donovan Mitchell to the Thunder, and I on this one I couldn't think of like a good player that they'd want in return, so I just did Donovan Mitchell to the Thunder for the Clippers. 3 of those first-round picks that the Clippers gave to the Thunder, and then along with a 2025 Thunder first-round pick. Reasoning for this being, so in total the Jazz are getting 4 first-round picks for Mitchell. So I think there's a world in which Donovan Mitchell isn't the hugest difference maker on the Jazz, and what I mean by that is like the identity of this team is Rudy Gobert and it's not Donovan Mitchell. And I know maybe that sounds harsh, but like you look at the team from 2017 with Gordon Hayward, they essentially just unplugged him and plugged in Donovan Mitchell, and it was the same team. And I think like for this team, I think you could find a wing scorer who's going to give you 15 to 20 a game. Like I'm not overstating this, and I'm not saying that these players are equal in talent, but if like let's say that the Jazz were to sign Tim Hardaway Jr. and trade away Donovan Mitchell, like how much of a drop off would there be if the rest of the roster stayed the same? Because like Tim Hardaway can give you like 17, 18 points a game on similar efficiencies to Donovan Mitchell, like slightly worse, but in the same ballpark, and the same team structure remains. Like the identity of this team is Rudy Gobert in the defense, so I think like losing Mitchell, it sounds overreactive, but it wouldn't be the end of the world for this team. And I think 4 first-round picks would be a pretty good haul for a guy who is an all-star, but at the same time, he's not irreplaceable, I guess. There you go, guys. Those are some trade scenarios I came up with Donovan Mitchell. If you think they're awful, let me know. If you think they're great, let me know, or leave your own ideas below. And I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.